Hi everyone. Once again, I am reading from the book of George W. Bush, the former US President. Yesterday, I went to the American Library, which is centered in 38 Jawaharlal Nehru Road in Kolkata, and I am a member of that library for the last more than 30 years. So you see, this is a book. This is the book which I borrowed actually. I borrowed actually 3 books, but this is one of the books that I borrowed. It is Decision Points by George W. Bush. Okay, and in my earlier video, I told that he was thinking about Iraq war because Saddam Hussein was creating problem for the world and for the particularly the people of Kuwait, and he was a dictator. And the dictator, I would say that he was like a demon because his rule was full of torture. His rule was full of threatening, and he endangered the life of people and security of Iraqi people. He was a very brutal, dictator in the world. So he actually he got the punishment from God actually. Okay, so how constant was George W. Bush? I came to know from this book. You know, in this book, George W. Bush he said that as a condition for ending hostilities in the Gulf War, UN Resolution 687 required Saddam to destroy his weapons of mass destruction as missiles with a range of more than 90 miles. The resolution banned Iraq from possessing biological, chemical, and nuclear weapons or the means of production them. To ensure compliance, Saddam was required to submit to a UN monitoring and verification system. At first, Saddam claimed he had only a limited stockpile of chemical weapons and Scud missiles. Over time, UN inspectors discovered a vast haunting arsenal. Saddam had filed thousands of bombs, shells, and warheads with chemical agents. He had a nuclear weapons program that was about 2 years from yielding a bomb, much closer than the CIA's pre-war estimate of 8 to 10 years. When his son-in-law defected in 1995, Saddam acknowledged that the regime had been hiding a biological weapons program that included anthrax and botulinum toxin. To keep Saddam in check, the United Nations imposed strict economic sanctions. But as outrage over Iraq's invasion of Kuwait faded, the world's attention drifted. Saddam diverted nearly $2 billion from the oil for food program, which the UN had created to provide for the basic humanitarian needs of innocent Iraqis, to enrich his cronies and reconstitute his military strength, including programs related to weapons of mass destruction. As children starved, he launched a propaganda campaign blaming sanctions for the suffering. By 1998, Saddam had persuaded key trading partners like Russia and France to lobby the UN to loosen the restrictions. Then he forced the UN weapons inspectors to leave the country. The problem was clear. Saddam had never verified that he had destroyed all of his weapons from the Gulf War. With the inspectors gone, the world was blind to whether he had restarted his programs. The Clinton administration responded by launching Operation Desert Fox, a 4-day bombing campaign conducted jointly with Great Britain and aimed at degrading Saddam's WMD capabilities. In a primetime address from the Oval Office in December 1998, President Clinton explained, quote, "The hard fact is that so long as Saddam remains in power, he threatens the well-being of his people, the peace of his region, the security of the world. The best way to win that threat once and for all is with a new Iraqi government, a government ready to live in peace with its neighbors, a government that respects the rights of the people. Heavy as they are, the costs of action must be weighed against the price of inaction. If Saddam defies the world and we fail to respond, we will face a far greater threat in the future. Saddam will strike again at his neighbors. He will make war on his own people. And mark my words, he will develop weapons of mass destruction. He will deploy them and he will use them. Unquote. The same year, Congress overwhelmingly passed the President Clinton signed the Iraq Liberation Act. The law declared a new official policy of the United States to support efforts to remove the regime headed by Saddam Hussein from power in Iraq and to promote the emergence of a democratic government. By early 2001, Saddam Hussein was waging a low-grade war against the United States. In 1999 and 2000, his forces had fired 700 times of our pilots patrolling the no-fly zones. For my first 8 months in office, my policy focused on tightening the sanctions, or, as Colin Powell put it, keeping Saddam in his box. Then September 11 hit, and we had to take a fresh look at every threat in the world. There were state sponsors of terror. There were sworn enemies of America. There were hostile governments that threatened their neighbors. There were nations that violated international demands. There were dictators who repressed their people. And there were regimes that pursued WMD. Iraq condemned all those threats. Saddam Hussein did not just sympathize with terrorists. He had paid the families of Palestinian suicide bombers and even sanctuary to terrorists like Abu Nidal, who led attacks that killed 19 people at the Israeli Airlines ticket counters in Rome and Vienna, and Abu Abbas, who hijacked the Italian cruise ship Achille Lauro and murdered an elderly, wheelchair-bound American. Saddam Hussein wasn't just a sworn enemy of America. He had fired at our aircraft, issued a statement praising September 11, and made an assassination attempt for a former president, my father. Saddam Hussein did not just threaten his neighbors, he had invaded two of them, Iran in the 1980s and Kuwait in the 1990s. Saddam Hussein didn't just violate international demands, he had defied 16 UN resolutions dating back to the Gulf War. The people should know actual fact what happened, why the United States of America and other NATO allies attacked on Iraq, because Saddam had been given chances to control himself, to bring about peace in Iraq and in the regions, in the neighboring regions. But he didn't. He defied the requests of the United States of America. So, to stop him, that was the need of the time. That was the need of that hour. Because if he was allowed to do this massacre, he was allowed to do this, do his dictatorship, this brutal dictatorship, then the world as a whole would be under threat. We're supposed to be under threat. So that is why the United States of America, with a view to bring about peace in the world and to reduce the threat of Saddam Hussein, had compelled to attack Iraq. Okay. So once again, he wrote in page number 228 in the last para, Saddam Hussein did not just rule brutally, he says. George W. Bush says that Saddam Hussein did not just rule brutally. He and his henchmen had tortured innocent people, raped political opponents in front of their families, scalded dissidents with acid, and dumped tens of thousands of Iraqis into mass graves. You just imagine the situation, how brutal his administration was. In 2000, Saddam's government declared that people who criticize the president or his family would have their tongues slashed out. Later that year, an Iraqi obstetrician was beheaded on charges of prostitution. The women's true crime was speaking about corruption in the Iraqi health ministry. Saddam Hussein did not just pursue weapons of mass destruction, he had used them. He destroyed mustard gas and nerve agents against the Iranians and massacred more than 5,000 innocent civilians in a 1988 chemical attacks on the Kurdish village of Halabja. Nobody knew what Saddam had done with his biological and chemical stockpiles, especially after the border inspectors out of the country. But after reviewing the information, virtually every major intelligence agency in the world had reached the same conclusion. Saddam had WMD in his arsenal and capacity to produce more. One intelligence report summarized the problem, quote, since the end of inspections in 1998, Saddam had maintained the chemical weapons effort, energizing the missile program, made a bigger investment in biological weapons, and has begun to try to move forward in the nuclear era, unquote. Before September 11, Saddam was a problem America might have been able to manage through the lens of the post-September 11 world. My view changed. I had just witnessed the damage inflicted by 19 fanatics armed with box cutters. I could only imagine the destruction possible if an enemy dictator passed his WTO to terrorists. With threats flowing into the Oval Office daily, many of them about chemical, biological, or nuclear weapons, that seemed like a frighteningly real possibility, and the stakes were too high to trust the dictator's word against the weight of the evidence and the consensus of the world. The lesson of September 11 was that if we waited for a danger to fully materialize, we would have waited for too long. I reached a decision: we would confront the threat from Iraq one way or another. With this, I would like to conclude here, and in the next video, I will tell more about George W. Bush's decisions he took during his presidency. With this, I'd like to conclude here. Thank you. Thank you very much for lending your ears.